Hello, everyone, and thanks for showing up for my masterclass on IT security. Roger Grimes, that's me, teaches you phishing mitigation. This really is everything I can think of and know before can think of to help you mitigate phishing attacks. If you haven't met me before, I'm Roger Grimes. I've been doing computer security 34 years, earned all of these gray hairs. I've written 12 books and over 1,100 magazine articles. There's some of my books. My latest one is Hacking Multi-Factor Authentication. I work for Know4. We're the world's largest security awareness training and simulated phishing platform vendor. We help people try to teach themselves and their coworkers and friends and family not to be phished. It's a pretty cool thing to be doing. But today is all about phishing, and this really is kind of like a capstone course in phishing mitigation. It is everything. There's something like 89 slides here, and that's even cut down. It's going to be a lot of information. I always talk fast, but I'm going to talk particularly fast today, because I'm going to try to help you develop a comprehensive defense in-depth plan for phishing mitigation. It's going to be kind of an inch deep and a mile wide. My idea is to help introduce you to all sorts of things that, policies, technical tools, and awareness training best practices that you can look at and go, hey, that sounds like a good idea, or, oh, I didn't know about that. So that's really what I'm trying to do, is just give you a little bit of everything, let you see what you like, what you don't like, what you may be missing, maybe what you might need to improve, and even cover things like cybersecurity insurance. So, but the first question is, why is it so key that we have to do security awareness training to teach people to be the human firewall? Well, it has to do with this one simple fact. First of all, that one simple fact, a couple simple facts, but they lead to one simple conclusion, is that there's a whole lot of vulnerabilities, a whole lot of ways that you and your organization and devices can be compromised. Last year, we had over 18,000 separate vulnerabilities that you were told that you had to be worried about. That works out to like 49 or 50 a day, day after day, year after year. And you're told that you've got to patch these and hurry up. About a third to a quarter to a third of those are considered with the highest criticality that if you don't patch could take over your environment. And that's on top of, the hundreds of millions of malware programs trying to break into your environment, and all the hacker types, the ransomware and financial hackers and nation state hackers and script kiddies and activists. There's a whole lot of threats going on. But really what's more important than the threats is how hackers and malware break in, what we call the root cause exploits. These are the 10 ways that anything, hacker or malware, can break into a device or your environment. Your problem really isn't, let's say, ransomware. It's how ransomware got into your environment. Well, here's the 10 ways. It could be, programming bug would be something like usually unpatched software. That's a bug that has been patched, but no one's applied the patch. Or it could be a 0 day where there's not a patch yet available. Social engineering certainly is one of the biggest reasons. Authentication attack is like password guessing, or something like that, or man-in-the-middle attack. Human error, that certainly caused a lot of errors. Misconfiguration, eavesdropping, where someone's sniffing on network traffic or trying to man-in-the-middle it to be able to get the information in between. Could be like data network traffic malformation. That would be like a denial of service attack or a buffer overflow or something like that. Could be an insider attack. People are stealing information and stealing credit cards and stealing information to take to their next employer. It could be a third-party reliance issue, meaning some vendor or contractor gets compromised and they use that, the attackers use that, that person being compromised to compromise you. Or it could be a physical attack, where they steal your hard drive, steal your laptop, steal your PCs or something like that. But these are the 10 ways that anybody can break in, at least that I know of. But when you look at those 10 ways, the most common ways are social engineering and unpatched software. Social engineering is responsible for the vast majority of malicious data breaches and has been responsible for the vast majority of data breaches since at least 2009. It has been the #1 or #2 cause for malicious data breaches in the entirety of the 34 years that I've been doing computer security. Unpatched software is responsible for around 20 to 40% of all malicious data breaches. In some years, unpatched software has been the #1 cause. Like back in, I think it was 1999, unpatched Oracle Java was by itself, one program was responsible for like 91% of all successful web breaches. But since 2009, it's been social engineering. And social engineering and unpatched software have been the #1, #2 ways for an environment to get compromised. And they account for the vast majority of risk in most environments. Everything else that you can think of out of those other 10 ways that, eavesdropping, misconfiguration, insider attack only account for, typically in most environments, only 1 to 10% of the risk. But social engineering and unpatched software account from anywhere between 90 and 99% of the risk. So what that means is that if you don't mitigate social engineering and do better patching, well, it's kind of game over, because that's how most hackers and malware get into most organizations. And when you're trying to fight them, you're trying to come up with the best policies, the technical defenses, and training to prevent badness from getting into your environment. You want to create preventative controls and defenses that stop something from happening in the first place. You want to detect if something's got past your preventative controls and get early warning so that you can then respond and recover and minimize the amount of damage. And again, the way that you do this is try to create a layered defense in depth, best combination of policies. And policies are things like, don't leave your workstation open when you walk away. Don't click on any unexpected file attachment. Never give your password out to somebody that, to an email or to someone that calls. Good policies that help people try to be more secure. Technical defenses, those are all the technical things you can do with computers and firewalls and, secure configurations of your computers and antivirus software and, spam and phish filtering and content filtering software, all the technical defenses where you can stop things from getting to people's desktop in the first place. Well, no matter how great your policies and your technical defenses are, there's always going to be some amount of badness that gets by those things. And so you have to train yourself and your coworkers on two things. One is how to spot badness, how to spot phishing, so if something comes across into email or comes across into their, on their SMS messaging or so they get a call from someone that's claiming to be from Microsoft that's trying to help them with their viruses or something, you need to make people aware of the different types of malicious attacks that are out there and then teach them how to treat them, which is, to ignore them, delete them, forward them to the IT security team so that they can handle them. But that's what you need to do. That's why the human firewall is critical. I've been in computer security for 34 years. I've heard a ton of people tell me, "Oh, we're going to defeat phishing." Like a year or two ago, I was around a CEO of a Fortune 5 company. I was a CISO, really good guy. I like him. I still like him to this day. But at this conference of CISOs, he said, "Hey, we finally figured out how to defeat phishing, and in another month, you'll never need to worry about phishing." And I just laughed because I've heard somebody claim that, just like, "Oh, you're not going to need antiviruses or whatever." He made that claim, and here it is 2 years later, and there's still plenty of phishing going on. We have not yet learned out how to stop and prevent phishing from getting to people's inboxes or on their cell phones or in their voicemails. And because of that, you need to train them again how to spot it and then how to treat it, which again is ignore, delete, or forward it somewhere. So because of that, I'm going to give you the comprehensive defense in depth phishing mitigations. We're going to cover policies and documentation you need, selection, implementation of technical defenses, just quick little briefing overviews of those, go into the best practices of security awareness training, and even briefly cover cybersecurity insurance. So you always have to start off with policies that help people be better and more secure. You start with an acceptable use policy. Every company should already have one of those. That's a more generalized computer security document that, again, says things like, make sure you always lock your desktop when you walk away. Make sure your desktop doesn't have, confidential information out on it. Make sure you don't use your password that you use at work somewhere else, and don't let somebody else use your login name. The acceptable use policy document should be read and reviewed and signed by every employee when they join your organization, and then reviewed, updated, and reviewed and signed again annually thereafter. Every employee should get and review and learn. The acceptable use policy is what is the acceptable use at your company. On top of that, you need to have specific phishing mitigation policies, and that's because phishing and social engineering is the #1 way that most companies get compromised. And you want to have documented education and simulated phishing testing every week, and you want to, at least every month. You want to have some type of education and simulated phishing test at least every month. You maybe want to tell people, hey, there's consequences if you are detected as failing a lot of the phishing test. Consequences being more training and things like that, and also training documentation content. We'll cover that more Again, everybody should have an acceptable use policy already. The only difference I would say that I see is a lot of people don't have their vendor sign that. But if you have a vendor or a contractor that is either coming in and using your network or is consuming your data in some service that they're helping you, they need to understand what is or isn't allowed regarding security. You need to try to make sure that the security that they use is strong or better than the security that you use. If you don't have a security use policy, there's a lot of examples on the internet. I've got a link here on the getsafeonline.org website. That's a really good acceptable user policy. And I'd say the average acceptable user policy, usage policy, user policy, they typically run from about 4 pages, 8 pages, maybe. I've seen them up to 40 pages. That gets a bit long. But anyways, lots of good examples out there in the internet that you can use. The only thing that I would say here is that most of them don't have a section specifically on phishing mitigation, which is wrong because it's the number one way that most organizations get attacked. They have sections on encryption and sections on password and sections on patching and sections on all kinds of stuff, but most of them don't have a phishing mitigation section, and they should. So you want to make sure that if your acceptable use policy doesn't have a phishing mitigation section, that it does. Because you want to make sure that every new employee that's being hired gets exposed to what phishing is and how to mitigate it and how to fight it. Plus, you want to include links to other more specific phishing mitigation sections. Usually, most acceptable user policies have some section called employee monitoring, where the company says, hey, know that when you use our assets, we could monitor you, we could monitor your communications or email or something like that. Usually that's in there for legal reasons, privacy reasons and legal reasons. And one thing you may want to add there is you may want to let them know that maybe they're being simulated phished, and that those test results would be, whether they are tricked by a simulated phishing test or not, may be used to evaluate them for further training or testing, or even may impact them in some other way with consequences in there. The idea is that you want to make sure that you communicate any type of monitoring that you do and simulate phishing test, and the results that you get from that may be considered in some states, some companies, some countries as employee monitoring. Yep, so that sounds kind of weird, but yes, I've absolutely heard companies, lawyers tell me that if you as the security awareness training admin gets a result that says this person passed or this person failed, it actually counts as employee monitoring and an invasion of their privacy if you did not tell them of that in their acceptable use policy. So talk to your lawyer, see if you need to add that in there. I think it's always a good idea to define what phishing and social engineering is. Just because you know about it and just because 99% of the world knows about it doesn't mean everybody knows about it. I routinely give lectures and presentations where people come up to me afterwards and go, what did you mean by phishing? What did you mean by social engineering? What did you mean by patching or updating? I used to kind of almost laugh, but now it's happened so much. I just understand there's some people that live the type of lives or in the roles that they don't get exposed to the same information as everybody else. So make sure you define what phishing is. And I like to call it the process of phishing is the process of maliciously masquerading as a trusted entity. So that could be a friend, it could be a boss, it could be a brand like Microsoft or Facebook or Instagram, to acquire unauthorized information or create a desired action. The information that they could be trying to get that would be something like a login name or password. It could be W-2 information. It could be company spreadsheets or something like that, or create a desired action. That would be like usually running a Trojan horse program or something like that. That's the sort of stuff that you want to make sure to communicate with people. What is phishing? Again, it's a con. It's somebody trying to trick you into revealing something or doing an action that could be harmful, contrary to the victim or their company's own self-interest. And you may want to tell them, hey, it can happen in person, it can happen in email, it can happen in instant messaging or SMS or over the phone with a voice call. That would be, a good example of that again is, hey, Microsoft, I'm with Microsoft and we've detected a virus on your system and we want to help you. And you may even want to tell them the difference between phishing and spear phishing and spamming and vishing and that sort of stuff. Uh, you should have specific phishing mitigation policies in your security policy, including the most common ways that every employee should learn how to recognize social engineering. We call it the social engineering red flags, or red flags of social engineering. We have some really great documents to help you with that, including this PDF here. If you go to the link below here that goes to an article that talks about our red flags of social engineering PDF poster, but this is like the 22 ways, most common ways, signs and symptoms that anybody that's trying to evaluate an email should look at and decide and help determine whether or not an email they're looking at is real or not. You know, things like, is it coming with potentially dangerous file attachments? Is it got a stressor event message saying you have to do it now? Is it coming from a new person? Is it unexpected? Is the from sending email address different than the sender that's in the text message? Is the subject weird? Is the subject different than the body text? Did it come at a weird time, like 2 a.m. at night, and so on and so on and so on? So this is a PDF poster that you can download and share with anyone. It's a really good, quick overview of the 22 most common ways that anybody can look for signs and symptoms of social engineering. And I'll talk about another PDF that we give out soon as well. And you want to tell people what to do when they, if they see a fish or suspect a fish. We really like to say that, we like the fish alert button. That's a free download, the fish alert button. That works with Outlook and Gmail on both regular computer and mobile clients. But when you have that installed, if someone sees an email that they think is a fish, they can actually click on that button and it will report. It will delete the email, which is good, out of the person's inbox, and then forward it to a predetermined email address, which is hopefully like IT or IT security. You want to tell people if they see a fish, they shouldn't open it or they shouldn't click on links. When in doubt, call the sender to see if they really meant to send something. You really want to tell them what to do when they see a fish, which is at the very least ignore and delete, or it's always good to report it. And the fish alert button is really good at allowing them to quickly delete it and report it at the same time. You want to tell an employee what to do, again, when one is detected. You want to create a culture of acceptance for reporting possible fishes. I've been to places, a couple, and I've heard about a few more where they we fire somebody if they miss a fish or something like that. That is a recipe for disaster, because if you tell someone they're going to be fired if they miss a fish or miss a simulated fish or a real phishing email, if they miss a fish and then later on realize it is a fish, which is a very common event, they're not going to report it, right? They're not going to report something that's going to get them fired. So you want to create a culture, a healthy culture of acceptance, and to let people know they're not going to get in trouble for reporting possible fishes later on. You also want to tell someone what to do when they've been successfully phished, right? So maybe they clicked on the link, provided the credentials, or maybe they have a Trojan horse program on their computer, or it's across the network now. You've got to decide ahead of time when your company and organization is going to do incident response and forensics investigation. If someone fails a real or a simulated fish test, are they going to, or is any new education required? Typically, that's a good thing, right? To help educate them, make them better stewards of information in your organization. Some people that fail a lot of phishing tests, they actually get a reduced functionality in the desktop. I've heard where they can only go to the internet, go to predefined websites by IT. IT's like, hey, sorry, you've been shown to fail a bunch of phishing tests, and because of that, we're going to have to reduce your functionality, reduce risk to the company, at least until you pass a couple of phishing tests. I've heard of it tied to an annual review, where as part of the annual review, management will cover it and talk about whether the person was detected as succeeding or failing on different simulated phishing tests or real phishing tests. I talked to one CEO, CISO, that told me that every employee that doesn't fall in his company that doesn't fall for a single simulated phishing test or real phishing email gets $1,000 at the end of the year, which I think, by the way, is amazing, right? But I said to the CISO, I said, I can't believe you're giving everybody $1,000. That's a lot of money. He goes, it's a lot cheaper than paying ransomware. I thought, well, that's a good point. And what's interesting is I got phished this year. It was a simulated phishing test. I got phished. I fell for it. I couldn't believe it. I'm human. I got phished. And I was thinking, man, that means I wouldn't have got my $1,000 if that was how they did it in the company. And certainly, a lot of people define different requirements for a greater number of misses. Like, in our company, we actually say, like, you miss the first fish, you just take some additional education. You miss the second fish, maybe it's more education. Maybe your boss talks to you. A third phish, you're now talking to someone professional. We actually have counselors in our company that help people go, hey, what is it? If you've missed your third simulated phish, what is it? What's going on? What are you missing? This is the sort of thing to try. Maybe you should never click on a link. You should always, go to it manually in a browser, or maybe you should copy it to a clipboard. But they actually kind of work with the person. They kind of go, what is it that's triggering you to click on these phishes? Like in my case, I clicked on what I thought was like a COVID phishing email. Well, I didn't think it was a phishing email, but it was a COVID email saying that, oh, you can come get your vaccinations. And I knew we were months away from vaccination, so I was pissed off that I was being told that I could come get a vaccination when vaccinations didn't exist. And I clicked on the link, and it was a simulated phishing test. And I went, and I realized that I could be emotionally motivated into clicking on a link. And let me say, the email had lots of, signs and symptoms, red flags of social engineering that if I had paid attention. And what I learned is that I thought I was unphishable. Now, I learned I can be phished, and that I can be emotionally motivated to click on something. So now what I learned, and I actually talking with our kind of phishing counselor, because maybe I shouldn't admit, but it happened more than once. But what I learned is that if I feel like I'm being emotionally triggered to click on some email or something, that, that's a sign for me to slow on down, right? To go, hey, is this really, do most emails that come to me really trigger me? And most of them don't. So when I get one that might be kind of emotional, or, I'm ready to click, I slow down now and say, knock on wood, knock on my head. I don't think I've been successfully simulated phish test in a long, long time now, but I did have some issues for a couple of weeks where I had to talk with someone and they helped me out. So, but the idea is that if someone's missing more than once or something like that, maybe it might require more than just education. Maybe it will take the human touch to help somebody figure out how to get by. You want IT to know what to do ahead of time to a successful phish. What is their incident response plan for phishing? They're going to gather initial information. What are they doing to minimize further damage if some type of Trojan horse programs on the loose or ransomware? When will they do actual forensics on a system? Do you need to update your preventative controls? Do you need to update your policies or training? All those things to figure out, okay, why did this phish or phishes get on by? You want to let employees know that you do security awareness training. You want to let them know that how it's done, what type of training, like, we used KnowBe4 and we do it through training videos and posters and games. You know, let them know how often it's done, not when it's done, though. It's all right to tell them, hey, we do simulated phishing tests, monthly or something like that, or weekly, but you don't want to tell them when some companies I've seen actually tell their employees when they're going to do a simulated phishing test. Well, that's not doing you any good. Then they're looking out for it. You want to but it's all right to tell them that you do it. But you do want to tell them what the official training methods are and from whom, because we've seen fake phishing companies that were really just phishing attempts, and or like sometimes I used to say, when everybody remember fake antivirus, when there used to be people get these fake antivirus notices on their screen that your computer is infected. I used to ask people, do you train your employees in what their real antivirus warning message looks like? Most companies didn't. I was like, and if you don't train them in what the real message looks like, how can you expect them to recognize the fake one? Same one here is you want to let them know who and how is the method that you deliver your security awareness training. So if they see something that's coming from another company claiming to be some other vendor, they might know that, hey, this is a phish or something like that. You also want to tell all users that they should always hover over all URL links to verify. Anytime you get one in an email, or you're going to a website, before you click on a link, just hover over that object, hover over that link. Try to learn how to tell the difference between a rogue URL and a legitimate URL. I'll show you a document in a minute that can help with that. Tell them not to install unauthorized software. That leads to a lot of Trojan horse programs. And never to give their credentials in response to an email or a call. You should say that we never send you an email and we never call you to tell you to reset your credentials or give us your credentials. And of course, it doesn't hurt to use multi-factor authentication wherever possible. I wrote a book called Hacking MFA, where I talk about the over 50 ways that I can hack different MFA solutions. I can hack any MFA solution at least a couple of different ways. But what you want to do is use MFA where it's possible, because MFA does reduce many forms of authentication credential risk. And, like, you can't be hacked out of your password, or phished out of your password if you don't have a password. So use MFA where it's possible. Unfortunately, MFA doesn't work with even 2% of the world's websites and services. Here's another good example policy, like how to prevent CEO wire fraud. That's when people get these emails that go, hey, I need you to send me this money to cover this invoice that needs to be paid right away, or I need you to send me this money, or this business deal is going to collapse, or I need you to go out and buy 10 Amazon gift cards and so on. Update your policy to say that anytime someone gets an unexpected request for money or gift cards or invoice payments or wiring instructions, that they must verbally confirm that request with the requester at some predefined number before they actually do it. Today there are companies losing millions of dollars to these CEO wire fraud phishing attacks. And so the employee is, wiring $1 million or, $3 million somewhere, and then they meet the CEO in the hallway days later and they're like, hey, did you get that money? How did that deal go that I helped you close? And the CEO is like, what? What are you talking about? As far as consequences go, we believe in more honey and less sticks. We do not believe in firing people for failing a phishing test. Anybody can be phished. Let me say that again. Anybody can be phished. To the companies that say, if you get phished once, we'll fire you, let us know who you are. We'll phish you. Whoever makes that rule, we can phish those people. And if anybody can be phished, Nobel Prize, physics prize winners, have been phished. It has nothing to do with intelligence. It has to do with training. It has to do with how susceptible somebody might be. People that tend to be more honest are actually easier to phish. People that generally don't, trust anyone ever, they're generally harder. But altogether, the more that you train somebody, the less susceptible they are to phishing. The number one way to prevent somebody from being phished is to introduce them to different types of phishing. Like if you tell them Microsoft will never call you and tell you that you have a computer virus that they're going to help you with, that person is far less likely to fall for a scam where there's somebody claiming to be from Microsoft to help them with their computer virus, right? That's why I call it security awareness training. We think that when people fall for a real phish or a simulated phishing test, that you should give them more training and longer training, trying to help them, to educate them, to decrease the amount of phishing that they may click on. Again, we think, supervisors can give personal counseling, or you can even have like a trusted, what we call a champion or a hero or something like that. It helps educate people. I remember one time I asked a woman, how can I help? She'd clicked on like 10 phishing attacks. I'm like, how can I help you? And she said, I think if you help me, if I was part of your anti-phishing class for new employees. And I thought, well, that's kind of crazy. But I actually brought her in to tell her story about how she'd been phished so much. And through that process, she actually stopped being phished. She told me, involve me in your classes, let me teach it. And somehow that made her a better employee and less likely to be phished. Some people include what's called the phish prone rate, how many times they've clicked on a simulated phish or a real phish as part of the employee's annual review process. Some people actually tie it to bonus or salary. I don't think you necessarily have to do that, but I think it's good to cover it to make people know that it's something important. And if you have some people that would just, the super phish prone that will click on anything that's sent their way, maybe you lock down their internet access so they can only go to a couple of pre-approved websites until they prove that they're not being phished as easily. And then, for some people, maybe, they get down the road and this are 5 or 10th or 20th, simulated phishing test they failed. Maybe, maybe there has to be some more consequences. But the whole idea is that if you have consequences, that you need to, make them clear and put them in documentation. And again, we believe more in more honey and less sticks. So we believe in celebrating people's successes. And if you have a department or a company that has significantly less failures in a phishing test, maybe they get a pizza party or they go bowling or something like that, or they get a cash bonus, like that one organization does. We're all about rewarding people for positive behavior far more than negative consequences. Of course, any adds, deletes, or changes to your existing policies or documents need to be reviewed by management and legal before implementing, because I have not stayed at a Holiday Inn lately. I am not a lawyer, so make sure before you change any of your policies or procedures and documents that you get them reviewed by senior management and legal. Cybersecurity insurance. I used to be a critic of cybersecurity insurance. I'm actually now a big proponent, and I think everybody should have cybersecurity insurance for a couple of reasons. But the biggest two reasons is, first of all, it limits how much money you might have to pay out of pocket if you get hit by a cybersecurity incident. And number two, if you do get successfully compromised by a cybersecurity incident, they're really good at getting you really good help quickly. And that second reason, I think, is just as important as the first reason. This cybersecurity insurance companies deal with very good recovery people because they want to reduce the amount of money that they have to pay, which means getting you back up as quickly and cheaply as possible. And they're dealing with people that have been there and done that 1,000 times. Know that when you get cybersecurity insurance, there's first-party and third-party coverage. First-party coverage, which is the majority of the claims in cybersecurity insurance, is the stuff that the company itself, when you get hit, what your costs are and what it takes to recover and get back up and running. Third-party coverage would be somebody, a business partner or a customer or something like that, suing you and claiming that you caused some damage to them. There's a lot of really good cybersecurity policies out there. The things that I would tell people to avoid is some of these policies have these special reduction clauses that if it involves social engineering, you get paid less. Like I know this one company has a $50 million cybersecurity insurance policy covering the entire gambit of the organization. And it says, but if it involved, they have a clause that says, if it involves social engineering, if the attack that got them involves social engineering, that it limits it to $200,000 for phishing attacks. Well, since phishing attacks are involved in 70 to 90% of all malicious data breaches, that essentially means that cybersecurity policy isn't a $50 million policy, it's only a $200,000 policy. So make sure you don't have one of those special exclusion policies. I don't see as many of them out there today, but it's certainly, that's a way to get your if you get cybersecurity insurance so cheap that you can't believe it, I would look out for a clause like that. Also find out who pays the ransom, if the ransom has to be paid, who gets to decide who pays the ransom or not. Let me say, I was talking to one cybersecurity organization the other day, and all their members say that if someone gets hit and they have to pay the ransom, they actually have a service that looks at the ransomware gang, and it follows the Bitcoin blockchain that's being used to pay that ransomware group. And they've actually tracked it back, and they know whether or not that ransomware payee or family is on the do not pay list or the terrorist, watch list where you can get in trouble if you pay. And I think it's a pretty cool service that they'll actually give you, a review about whether or not you should pay the ransom for a particular group. Is CEO wire fraud events included, especially when an employee accidentally helped with it? I've heard of where the insurance company wouldn't cover that because the employee transferred the money that they shouldn't have transferred, and they transferred against the policies. Are intentional insider events covered in your policy? What assets? Is it only computer assets, or do you need to include your SCADA or AC equipment? I think one of the largest breaches I was ever directly involved in was like the Target hack, and that I think it was Target. It involved their AC vendor initially got compromised. They had not changed the default password. The attacker broke in and then started spreading malware using wireless network stuff, but they broke in through the AC vendor. So what assets are covered? Technical defenses are all the technical things you can do to stop phishing, your antivirus and endpoint detection and response software that would detect malware trying to get on your system. Although I got to tell you, most ransomware, as an example, is in most victim companies for 8 to 12 months before it goes off, and it's undetected the whole time, even though they had up-to-date antivirus. Although, if you got a suspected malware program, you can submit it to Google's free virustotal.com site. That has, I think today, 73 antivirus engines, but your antivirus software may not be as accurate every time, but when you have 73 antivirus engines that are scanning and executable, that's better than one. And so that's a good thing to try. Heuristics, that's where they're not using virus signature files and pattern matching. They're using behavior, saying, hey, when I run this thing, is it doing, is it modifying my registry? Is it trying to live through a reboot? Is it trying to encrypt files? Anomaly analysis is it doing something that seems to be high risk and bad, or is it connecting out to Russia or something like that, where I don't have any customers in Russia, and all of a sudden I've got all this data going to Russia. Well, maybe that's something that should be investigated. Intrusion detection, that could be host-based intrusion detection or network intrusion detection. Are they detecting signatures or activity or behavior that is indicative of something malicious? Anything you can do to put down that malicious behavior is going to decrease the maybe impact or outcome or initial root breach exploit. And firewalls can stop, connections from weird places. Here's just an example I've got up here. This is from sysinternals.com. That's actually a website that's owned by Microsoft, or the sysinternals software is run by Microsoft. Used to be owned and run by Mark Rusinovich, and he still runs it at Microsoft. He works for Microsoft now as CTO of Azure, I think, right now. But it's kind of a cool process. On a Windows machine, you can install Process Explorer, tell it to run, and say, submit any running executables to Google's free VirusTotal.website. And like you can see on the screen where it's saying, hey, 0 out of 69 or 59 antivirus engines think this is a virus. Then you'll see 2 of them that say 1 out of something. The only caveat I would say is that anytime it says 1 out of something, it's almost always just one of the antivirus engines has a false positive, and it's never been really malicious. But anything that's more than 2, if you see 2 or 3 out of something or 14 out of something there, then it's always been malware. So I love Process Explorer for Windows machines. I love VirusTotal. I think it's not perfect, but it's one antivirus engine not so great. 73 a lot better. And I've got some links there that you can read more of how to use them if you're interested. Your email client should already be securely enabled and configured by default. Don't mess things up. When I see people that are infected through their email clients, typically they've ignored like multiple warnings. Email clients like, are you sure you want to run this? This could be malicious. Are you sure you want it? Are you really sure you want to run it? And people are like, yes. But you do want to make sure that your email clients and your browsers and email service security providers, if you use one, have secure protections enabled. Again, years ago, I used to write articles and even entire books on how to securely configure something. These days, the vendors have their stuff fairly securely enabled. You can make the security tighter, but usually it causes some operational interruption issues. So I'm a big fan of just saying, don't mess it up. You've got good default choices there from the vendor. Don't mess it up. Things like email clients saying block all, file downloads by default. And that's because if your email client automatically downloads something, that could confirm to a spammer that your email address is valid, or it could even, if on a Windows machine or Windows integrated authentication enabled browser, which there's several, could automatically send your password hash to an attacker where they could reuse it in a pass the hash attack or crack it to try to log on using your login name and password. So you don't want to allow pictures to be downloaded by default. And simply, that's why most email clients block downloading pictures and images by default. And if you go, yes, download them, you're taking an increased risk. So as I said, most of your secure configurations are set appropriately. Don't mess things up. I'm also a big fan of multi-factor authentication. Again, you can't be phished out of your password if you don't even know it. MFA significantly reduces some forms of, authentication hacking, but I can get around probably 90% of MFA solutions by using a phishing email. But it's still harder to do than without MFA. It's just that MFA doesn't necessarily protect you as much as you think. But with that said, using multi-factor authentication is typically a good thing, and I recommend it. It doesn't stop everything, but it does stop a lot of stuff. So I think that everybody should use MFA where they can. Unfortunately, you're still going to have to use passwords all over the place. And if you're like me, I've got like a couple of different MFA solutions for different websites and services, and in my building when I'm here versus remote and at home. Plus, I've got a bunch of passwords too. Password managers, you should never use the same password across any website or service, and your password should be long and complex, as long as complex as you can make them be. And, because of that, because human beings are not good about making long, complex passwords that are different for every website and service, it probably benefits the average person to use a password manager. There's a lot of really good password manager programs out there. If you're not sure which one you want to use, check out that link at the bottom of the screen here. It's at wired.com. That's Wired magazine, and they cover, I think, like 8 different password managers, and they pick a bunch of winners. You know, as long as the password manager has been around for a lot of years and it's used by a lot of people, they tend to be pretty good. You know, the password managers are really good, again, about allowing people to use unique, long, and complex passwords across a bunch of different websites and services. I use one, and I'm a big fan of password managers. Some companies like doing what's called red-green systems, which is where you have 2 systems, and one system is where you do business only, and the other system is like the personal stuff, where you pick up email or you go to Google or Instagram or Facebook or something like that. These red-green systems are actually, they do significantly reduce risk, but if you have 2 separate physical systems, if some people even do like 2 different virtual machines, so they'll have like one machine and they'll run a virtual machine that's red, or what they call the red-green system, on another. Those are, you know, it does reduce risk, but it usually almost doubles cost, right? Because when you have 2 systems, whether it's virtual or otherwise, typically you're going to have double the software licenses, double the support cost, or, you know, nearly the same support cost. You're going to have increased electricity. You got to patch 2. You've got to have antivirus on 2. You got to configure 2. You know, that sort of stuff. Although I do see some people that are using some more secure virtual machine type applications or application control programs to do the controlling, or like Cubes. Cubes is a really cool open source operating system that's based on Linux, but it takes every single application, even if it runs on a different operating system, and gives it its own virtualized hypervisor, hardware chip locked security isolation memory area. And what that does is, you know, if someone, like, you're in email and someone breaks out of your email, buffer overflows your email or something, exploits it, they don't automatically get entire access to the whole Cubes operating system, your entire desktop. So if you want to go to Cubes, you can go look up Cubes OS and download it. And what's kind of cool there is you can take every application or even different operating systems and make them appear as a single icon on the desktop. So in Cubes, you have all these different programs that really, to the end user, look like the same desktop with different icons, but really they're running in very highly isolated, hypervisor enforced virtual machines. Pretty cool. And I see all the popular operating systems going to something like Cubes. I think Cubes is already there. But I certainly see Microsoft Windows and Apple and other Linux applications eventually moving to the high security isolation that Cubes is already doing now. Cubes is kind of showing how it can be done. The only problem with Cubes, I think, is that it's a Linux operating system distro, so a lot of people don't know how to use that or run that or configure that. But anyways, it's a good alternative to take a look at without doubling your physical and virtual support costs. I think everybody should implement these 3 global phishing protection standards. I'm talking about Sender Policy Framework, Domain Keys Identified Email, and DMARC, which is Domain-Based Message Authentication Reporting and Conformance. These global anti-phishing standards, really, I guess we should say, phishing protection standards, have been around for a bunch of years now. They've proved their worth and they work. They don't fix every problem with phishing, but what they do, if you enable them, if someone gets an email claiming to be from one of your domains, somebody that has SPF, DKIM, and DMARC enabled, if you've enabled it and they've enabled it, they can check, and it happens automatically. The client or the server does it, but it checks to see if an email claiming to be from your domain, like it says it's from knowbefore.com, did that email really originate from an email server authoritative for the domain? So let me say that again. When you have SPF, DKIM, and DMARC enabled, both sender and receiver have to enable for this to get the full benefit, but it checks to see if an email claiming to be from your domain really was from an email server authoritative for your domain. Sender Policy Framework works with what's called the 5321 mail from address, which may not be the visible one that you see that, but if you do hit a reply, that is almost always going to be the same as the 5321 mail from address. But that's what SPF works off of. DKIM works off the 5322 address, and what it does is that DKIM-enabled email server has a public-private key pair, and it uses the private key to sign every outgoing email, and then the receiver can download the public key from that vendor off of their DNS server and use it to see if the digital signature of the signed email is valid for an authorized server for that domain. And then DMARC is essentially just, it's a management part that tells, it's the sender telling the receiver, hey, if you get an email that fails the SPF and or DKIM checks, you know, delete that email, put that email in quarantine, or maybe just accept it. But that's what DMARC is, essentially what the sender tells you should do with an email that fails SPF and or DKIM. So both sides need to have it enabled in order for it to be effective. Most of it works with DNS. And let me say again, you need to implement it. If you do not have SPF, DKIM, or DMARC enabled, if you do not know whether you have it enabled for your domains, you should look into it. You should enable it for all of your domains. It cannot hurt you. Then when it's enabled, when someone gets an email, if they want to, that the email servers and clients kind of automatically handle them now. But if you want to look in the email header, you can see what it kind of looks like. You can see in this case, like where it says SPF pass. So this email claims to be from harlanclark.com, and the email header of this email is saying SPF pass. It really did come from harlanclark.com, which is where I think I ordered some checks from SunTrust Bank, and the Harlan Clark was the person that was filling the check order. And here's an example of it failing. It was an email claiming to be from Microsoft Online, but you can see SPF failed, and the domain that it really came from was something called Dabuzi, augustdabuzi.com. It is not Microsoft.com. And again, by default, that means this email would have been put in my quarantine folder or spam folder, and I would have had to have gone out of my way and taken a look at it before I read it. And again, DKIM, that's just digitally signing email. This is what a digital signature looks like. That B equals, that's the digital signature of that email that when it was signed by the email server. And again, the receiver can, if you want to, you can look at the header and see there's DKIM pass, or you might have DKIM fail, or DKIM equals nothing, or something like that. And again, with DMARC, that is the sender telling someone that receives an email claiming to be from their domain that has failed SPF and DKIM how they should treat it. And usually they're going to say quarantine it, which puts it in the quarantine of the spam folder, or reject it, which means delete it so it never gets to the end user's inbox. Content filtering is a big deal for stopping phishing and spam. You have content filtering on email, content filtering on your internet browsing stuff. You can have spam filters, phishing filters, email filters. You should use as many as you can. You should block malicious inbound file attachments. Most email clients do that by default. Like in Microsoft Outlook, they block something like 40 different potentially dangerous file attachment types. You don't want people sending executables and DLLs and things like that in email. Even like that file : / that's actually could be a that's called a Euro moniker, but that file : / actually could be used maliciously to transmit your password hash link out on the internet to a hacker. So you should not let outbound connections with file : / in it. If you want to get more details, you can click on my CSO article link there, where I discuss how an attacker can steal your Windows password hashes and crack it simply because you clicked on a link that had that file : / in it. There's almost no legitimate reason for a URL to have file : / in it, especially for the internet. Some software programs today do what's called file attachment and URL detonation. So every time you get a URL, if you have a software, there's a lot of vendors that have this software. Microsoft has it, Barracuda has it, Proofpoint has it, Blue Coat has it, FireEye has it. A lot of the vendors have this. But essentially, when you're sending an email that has a URL link in it or has a file attachment, they actually execute that URL or file attachment in a virtualized area sandbox that you can't see, and then they try to analyze and say, did the thing that resulted from opening the file attachment or clicking on the link do something potentially dangerous? And the way that it might look like, here's an example of it in Office 365 using the Microsoft Advanced Threat Protection Scanning. But you can see someone's trying to open an email, and it's like, hey, stand by, the ATP scans in progress here. We're making sure your attachment is safe. When it gets through detonating it and everything's determined to be safe, it actually comes out and the email's there, or it marks it as deleted automatically or put into your spam folder or something like that. Blacklisting, those are, most email servers could benefit by having an automated update of blacklisting. Blacklisting are a list of domains that are known to send malicious activity. You can even go to the blacklistmaster.com that has 108 other blacklists. You should, and one's blacklists like URL House or the Open Spam Project and things like that, or the Barracuda blacklist. But anyways, it's always good to enable these things from Spam House or the DNS blacklist or Google Safe Browsing Program. But when you enable those, your email server, say if you get an email that has one of these potentially malicious domains listed as the sending domain, then we'll automatically reject it. Gray listing is another type of listing where I don't necessarily recommend this, but some people have some success with it. But every time an email gets sent to somebody who has gray listing enabled, and PostGray is the application you could try if you're interested in this, the email server by default will stop the email from getting to the end user and tell the original server that they need to retransmit it. Well, all real email servers mostly will resend that email, but phishing and spamming senders, their email servers they use typically don't. They're not usually using real email servers. They're using an email program that barely works. And so anyways, this gray listing will automatically block it for 0 to 15 minutes, ask the sending server to resend, and most of the spam servers will not respond to that or resend, and so that allows mostly only legitimate email to get by. The problem is some legitimate email doesn't retransmit itself automatically, and there's a lot of dropped messages, and I've heard a lot of people be mad about it. There's also more advanced blacklisting called reputation services that have a lot more intelligence, and they're a lot more dynamic from many different vendors like Microsoft and CrowdStrike and Google, where they actually keep up to date to what domains are being used for what. Here's an example of a Microsoft doing its analysis. If you're to look in, this comes out of an email header that I looked at, but I could see that it was saying this is the Microsoft Forefront Anti-Spam Report, and it was showing me that it had an SCL, which is a spam confidence level of 1. That rating can go from 1 to 10, with 10 being the worst. So with a spam confidence level of 1, it's even though it's from Hayward Marketing Media, so it's a media thing apparently that was sent to someone, it is not classified as being malicious and terrible. So there's a lot of these reputational black listing services out there that will mark email and content and tell you whether or not it's bad. There's some people that check for new DNS domains. I've not ever seen this automated in a tool, but I know some people that script this. But basically, their DNS server is scripted, so it looks to see how old the DNS domain it is that that's being created. Like in this chance, the domain, the example, the domain was themobilebonus.com. When I checked it at the time, it had only been up, in this case, I think a couple of months, but that's really short for a domain. I know some people that will block any DNS domain that was created in the last 24 hours. That is, very few legitimate domains are less than a day old, but many phishing and spear phishing and phishing domains are created within the last 24 hours. So I think if you can get it working on your email server and or browser saying, hey, if you find a new DNS domain that's less than a day old, block it by default. I think that's a good thing to try. Network pattern analysis, this is where you're checking to see if there's unusual activity, like, maybe there's a lot of activity going to Russia and you don't have a client in Russia. There's files being downloaded to, China. You don't have Chinese customers and stuff like that. But, like even within your own company, every file server doesn't need to talk to every client. Every file server doesn't talk to every other file server. Most clients don't talk to other clients. So you can actually try to figure out if there's anomalous network flows. And there's lots of products out there that do that. FireEye, CrowdStrike, Aruba, Cisco, StealthWatch, which Cisco bought. That's a really cool product that I liked a long time ago. And Corelight and Bro. Bro is an open source version for network traffic pattern analysis, and Corelight is like a commercial implementation of Bro. Also, of course, we believe in fantastic security training. You have to have good training. We believe in training your employees, doing simulated phishing tests at least once a month. We think you should do bigger training every year, like maybe 15 to 45 minutes every year. And then every month you do a shorter training, like 1 to 3 to 5 minutes, and then you send simulated phishing tests to see how well they like the training. But just remember, again, that security awareness training, whether or not you can be phished has nothing to do with how smart you are. Smart people fail phishing tests and get phished all the time. It's all about whether or not you're aware of various different types of attacks. So the biggest indicator of whether or not you're going to be phished is whether you know about a particular type of social engineering and whether you can create a culture, a healthy culture of skepticism, so people know that when they see certain types of things, phishing, the red flags of social engineering, that maybe they shouldn't click on it. So train like you're a marketer. You know, we all know that there's commercials, you know, on different sites that are, you know, you're trying to watch TV and it's like, oh my God, that same commercial for the third time in the last hour. I hate it. There's a reason why marketers are doing it, because they know that you remember it. So train frequently, at least once a month. Do it, be redundant in different ways, be entertaining so people don't hate it completely. Do it when they're hired, do it monthly, and annually, longer training and more training if they fail simulated phishing test. And you can change it up per group, per role. Like, you don't need to train somebody not to be phished out of changing wiring instructions if they're not somebody that can change wiring instructions, right? And you want to change it up for the different times and seasons of the year. Like around Christmas, we tend to do more phishing training around the fake gift card scams. You know, if there's, you know, around COVID, we're training people how to recognize what the real or fake COVID attempts are, and so on and so on. Always mixing general topics. Our most common successful phish is a free Dunkin' Donuts coupon. You want to do a little bit of everything in there. Any public information you can find on an employee is fair game. If they've got something in their social media site that's public, you know, that might be used to phish them. Same, you know, if they're telling you, oh, my company just, you know, we just bought new software, that would be something that could be fair game. So you want to use a mix, again, of general and spear phishing content that you've learned to test and train your employees. And again, give employees the red flags of social engineering PDF. You can download and use that, the 22 most common signs and red flags of social engineering. That's great to give. We also always think if you use our software and someone clicks on a simulated phishing test, it immediately tells you, here's the 5 things that you should have noticed to know that this was a fake phishing test or this was like a phishing test. If you give people immediate feedback, that's so much better than only doing it once a month or once a year. You want to keep your phishing test up to date. You know, like these, you know, this year, you know, COVID related, you know, around tax time, you want to warn people about W-2 scams and tax scams. You know, COVID, you want to, you know, tell people be careful about fake COVID checks. You know, back in this example here, it was talking about the scam of the week was the death based upon the deaths of Kate Spade and Anthony Bourdain. Anytime there's like a natural disaster, an election or something, you're going to see more phishing fraud around that. So make sure to keep your training current and letting people know what the current scams are. If you had our software, you could actually turn on scams of the week as a category, and that's the templates, the phishing template that phishers people would use or educate them with. And again, we always think it's a really great thing to give users a very quick and easy way to report a suspected phish. We say we have that free phish alert button. They just click the button, it reports it to IT, and IT can figure out whether it was a real phish or not. Also, you want to use data about who did or didn't click on particular phishes and simulated phishing tests, because you don't want to train everybody the same way. People that click on more phishes need more training. People that don't, you know, get tricked as easily need less training. But to figure out who that is, you need the data to figure out who is and isn't getting fooled by it. And again, train, test and training once a year, twice a year is not enough. You want to do it on average at least once a month. Anything less than that is not nearly as good. Automate it as much as possible. With our software, you can train people and then simulate phishing, test them, and then give them more training if they fail a test, and it's all automated. Make a culture where people feel safe reporting security mistakes, so that if they click on a phishing test, they don't, or click on a real fish, that they don't feel like they need to hide that. It's always good to tell them about that. Always get senior management approval before conducting any simulated phishing tests, because surprises are not good. I don't know anyone that was ever promoted for phishing the CEO without telling them that there was going to be a simulated phishing test. Other real life hints here: it's always good to teach yourself and your end users how to read what a real URL domain looks like. So if they get an email that's claiming to be from Microsoft, they might know, really, oh, it really comes from DevOpsNW.com, whatever that is. Or if it claims to be from LinkedIn, but it really is LL LinkedIn and not LinkedIn, then they would know that it could be a spam. And the same thing, you want to teach people how to know whether or not this is a real Bank of America or Maersk or Office 365 email. And how can you do that? Well, you can go to this link down here, and I talk about the 12 most common rogue URL tricks that you can share with your employees. You can download this PDF, use it yourself, print it, send it to your employees. Everybody should be trained of how to spot rogue URLs. If someone catches a real or simulated phishing test, it's always good to give people kudos. Here's a real email, just like at our company. It goes, hey, way to go. You reported using the fish alert button. You reported a potential phish. It was a real phishing attempt. Because of users like you, we're able to protect the company. Keep it up. It's a great way to do things. Also, monitor the internet and dark web to see if your company's passwords and logins are already out there, or our email exposure check tool will check to show you if your email server can be used by attackers to compromise the employees in your company. We're also big fans of champions and heroes, where you take the employees that are like, really understand phishing, and they just naturally have a better way of not only stopping phishing and recognizing phishing, but teaching others. Everybody loves to learn from a human when they can. So identify your phishing champions and use them to spread the education and love throughout your organization. For C-levels, we do know they like shorter trainings in general. They don't many times have 45 minutes a year to put into training. And so we actually have different videos for the CEO and CIO and CSOs, a little bit shorter in training than you'd give to the general employees there. I'm going to keep on and go to the end here. Just know that everything I just talked about over the last hour is included in my ebook that I wrote. You can download this ebook guide. I think it's like 50 pages long. It includes everything and more that I just covered, but in written format. So you can essentially download a written copy of this presentation without having to hear me talk so fast. And we're running out of time. I can't take any questions here, but if you have any questions, email me at rogerg@noble4.com, rogerg@noble4.com, and I promise I will answer all your questions and get back to you within 24 hours. And, of course, you can follow me on LinkedIn and Twitter. And thanks so much for putting up with my fire hose of information. Y'all have been a great crowd, and look forward to seeing y'all at my next webinar. Take care.